Good evening, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Williamsport City Council meeting tonight. This is our second budget work session. It's December 1st, 2021, and we are at Trade and Transit 2, third floor, again, meeting. We're going to get right into our budget review tonight. We have these departments tonight: Department of Public Safety, our general government, Human Resources, and Finance and Administration. When we work our way through these, that'll be the end of our work sessions. And then we'll be back tomorrow night for our regular city council meeting. And we will also entertain any additions, subtractions, motions that are made by council members. And then we'll be voted on until we have a final finished budget with a positive vote. So let's get right into it. Department of Public Safety, Office of the Director, page 29 is up first.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief. Welcome tonight.
All right. President, council members, appreciate your time tonight. I'll start off with the Department of Public Safety, Office of the Director. This year for 2022 proposed budget is salaries would be $44,564. FICA would be $3,400. Life insurance would be $150. Workers' comp would be $80. Pensions would be $21,551. Health insurance would be $36,200 for a subtotal of personal services at $105,945. To continue on to purchase of services, we have office rentals. Right now that's listed at $75,768. And then community outreach is listed at $3,000 for a subtotal of $78,768. Combining both services of personal service and purchases services, you have a total of $184,713 being proposed.
Are there any questions from council members? Questions or comments on this section? Yes, Councilman Yoder.
Good evening, Chief. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Just a point of clarification, the office rentals, that's for the entire police department, correct?
I believe
Or is
so,
that for all of public safety?
but I would defer to Mr.
That's-
Police.
That's just police. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
No other questions? Okay, we'll move to page 34.
Yes, sir. Moving on for Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Police. We'll start off with personal services. Right now, the salaries that you all have listed there is for the proposal of 2022 is now listed at $4,069,059. That's for a proposal of 47 officers. Upon talking to the mayor and President Allison there, I wanted to make a proposal for 48 officers would up to an additional 53,000. 53,000 and some odd change that would make the total to 4,122,633. Overtime, we propose 180,000. Comp time, we propose 180,000. Non-uniform, we're looking at 97,758. FICA is 72,000. Life insurance is 32,500. Workers' comp is going to be 156,000. Pensions of non-uniform, $43,102. Pensions is going to be $1,844,797. And then health insurance is going to be $2,766,500. The subtotal personnel services with 47 officers would be $9,441,716. And with the additional officer making 48, it would be $9,495,000 and $9,495,000 $290. And that would be the subtotal for personnel services under Public Safety Bureau of Police. Does anybody have any questions for those first?
Councilwoman Mealy?
Thanks, Dave and Randy. Just a quick question for Mr. Pavlak. I know the pension allocation is kind of spread across. Joe is here somewhere, right? Or is he not? Okay, hi, Joe. I'm sorry, I looked up at where you were before and I was like, wait, I know the pension allocation is just kind of our total pension obligation spread across every department, but why is it the same for the police as it was last year and reduced by more than a third for the non-uniform members? This is just me trying to understand how the calculation works.
For the pension calculations?
Yeah.
That's, if you remember the MMO, we had a huge decrease with the MMO.
Mhm.
Police stayed flat, fire went down due to expiring amortization payment. And I think some expiring amortization payments in the O&E reduced it slightly, but not as much as fire.
So this is reflective of the police cost, the police pension staying flat and the
Yes.
non-uniform count as
Yes.
a different kind of employee. Got
Yep.
it. Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. Thanks, Joe.
Evening, Chief. How you doing?
Good, how are you, sir?
Not too bad. I was just wondering if you had included in that additional number the health insurance for the additional officer.
I did not. I talked to Mr. Pollock right prior to now to see about that, and there's not a number that could be added in for that right now.
Thank you.
Chief, and the mayor can chime in on this also. So during last year's budget, one of the things that we talked about a little bit was, I think, the potential for expanded mutual aid opportunities with other municipalities, the county, and even the state police to expand our ability to provide police services in the city. Over the past year, what have those efforts looked like to forge more relationships, try to expand those opportunities to bring in more outside resources to help our police department, aside from as an alternative to hiring another officer?
Well, that's been ongoing. We need services and help, and we solicit the services of PSP many times. There's times with mutual aid, being that we are short-staffed, we do need the help of mutual aid of neighboring jurisdictions to come and help answer calls if we're handling something serious and don't have enough officers to dedicate to another call. So, yeah, we do have a mutual aid agreement that with other agencies that come in and help when needed.
Okay. Are we able to, I guess maybe a better way to ask it is, are we able to get more mutual aid as an alternative to hiring another police officer?
Well, mutual aid works on a needed basis, and then we would have to request for mutual aid. So it's not just an in-place thing. So if we are in need of help, we're going to have to make that request. And once the request is made, then help can come. It's not something that's pre-established.
Gotcha. The other reason I ask, I mean, this is talked about every year.
Yes, sir.
Every service we provide in the city, there's a cost to it.
Yes.
Public safety is one of the more critical, if not the most critical need that we serve. And I 100% understand and appreciate that. But the budget we have in front of us, if you take out the ARPA funding, okay, and you don't use the starting balance left over from last year, we have a bare bones budget and a $1.8 million deficit, meaning you got to find money somewhere else. And I know it's only $58,000 is peanuts in the grand scheme of things, but finding alternatives or finding better ways to, I guess, provide those services or doing it more efficiently. I mean, we need to be looking at those things from a cost standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always looking for, looking for exploration and ways for better policing. Policing is changing, it's evolving, and we're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I like to explore, sit down with, such as yourself and look at ideas to come up with. With what we were looking for is we have some retirements coming up that with the time that they have here and the revenue that would be in terms of what their cost is at what they're paying or being paid in the salary right now versus a new officer. So there is some flexibility there for costs that we found. So we have 2 officers that are retiring this year, one at the pay of a lieutenant and then one at the pay of a full patrolman. Officer C is what we call it. So,
Gotcha. And I don't know what your communication or relationship look like with other third-class cities. I mean, most, if not all, third-class cities have the police departments. They all look different, certainly as you go around and look. And Mayor Slaughter can probably help you with this and chime in with this. I know that he has developed some relationships across the state with other municipalities and cities through PML and what have you. Looking at a couple similar cities, Harrisburg, Lancaster, Newcastle. If you look at what it costs them
yes.
to deploy an officer, it's substantially less compared to us. I mean, by some quick math, at 47 officers, it's about $212,000 for us fully in. You know, that's supplies, that's materials, that's healthcare, et cetera. It's what it costs us to put an officer actually on the street. It's not just a salary of $58,000.
Understood.
You look at those other municipalities, they're all under $200,000. Lancaster's $150,000, for example. So
Yes, sir. I actually looked at some of these third-class cities and have some opportunities to establish some meetings. One being, looking at Easton. Easton was actually used in the comparison in the e-consults,
Okay.
which they actually, right now, their budget is a little bit more than us. It's about $12 million. They have 61 sworn officers, but their population is less than ours right now.
you said
So
how
that's
much?
one of the ones that I'm looking into. I actually would like to reach out and have a meeting with their chief. So your ideas are absolutely, I agree with what you're saying. And we are looking at third-class cities to see what we can do better
Yeah.
and see what other third-class cities are doing.
Yeah, it certainly seems like there are some strategies that they're deploying that could help minimize that. I mean, because there's a way that we can provide more officers or save money or what have you. So I'd be interested to see what that looks like as you continue to go through strategic planning and what have you.
Yeah, one of the things, because I am looking into things and to kind of put things into perspective. One of the simplest guides is provided by the FBI. In 2019, the FBI reported that the average number of officers per 1,000 population nationwide is at 2.4. So that means 2.4 officers for every 1,000 people. That's nationwide. For statewide in Pennsylvania, that figure rises to approximately 2.7 officers for every 1,000. Right now, Williamsport's at 1.67. So to put it into perspective, if we were to meet the national average right now, we would need 68 officers to provide the service that they're talking about. And for Pennsylvania, it would be up to 75, 76 officers. Now, I understand. I'm just trying to put it in perspective of these are the stats that, we found. This actually came from e-consults as well. We understand it's going to be difficult to get there. I get that. But I did want to bring that up to kind of put it in perspective. We are looking at options. We are looking at ways. Me and my team here, we've been looking at several options to try, how can we do this better? One of our biggest things is officer wellness, and we're trying to make things better for our officers. So in turn, we can provide a better service to our community.
Yeah. So just to put that into context specifically. So, and then I'll wrap this up. So with 47 officers, if we were under the Lancaster model, whatever that is, your budget would be $7 million, would free up $2.9 million. It would minimize the deficit, and it would also be able to, for us to provide more officers. So knowing what that, I don't know the specifics of what they're doing, what's different, what works, but I mean, there's a lot to be learned. We need to learn it. We need to learn it fast.
Absolutely. I've been in this position now for 6 months, and I appreciate your indulgence. It's my first budget session, but those are things that we are looking at, and looking to get into. So.
Thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
To follow that up, Chief, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
When we compare to these other cities, are you able to compare contracts?
That's what I want to look into.
Okay.
For instance, I was talking about Easton PD. They're talking about a $12 million budget.
Yeah.
And so I like to see how they came with.
Yeah, that would be helpful
So yes, absolutely.
information. Thank you. Councilman-elect Bider.
Good evening.
Good
The
evening.
question that I have is in regard to overtime. Between 21 and 22, I see the same amount of dollars allocated for 180,000. Through 10/30, we are at 85,000. With the request for an additional officer, it would seem that the need for overtime would almost be non-existent. I understand things happen, but what is the plan for 22 to help mitigate overtime?
Well, the one thing is, I just want to put out there and make sure we understand that there's no special formula to mitigate or to end overtime. But what we want to try to do is mitigate it. And the biggest thing is to try to, more officers are going to help mitigate that. If anybody's sitting there telling you that, they have a plan to end, aside from cutting all services, you're going to have a very difficult time. So with being understaffed and with what we're dealing with the overtime, a lot this year, we got hit with COVID, the lack of personnel. We have resignation, some suspensions that occurred, the extra vacation days that we were allotted 10 extra days to carry over. So there's 10 more holidays or vacation days that could be used by officers that were taking them this year. So COVID was actually a big hit. So it's tough to plan for those because those are unforeseen circumstances and it's very difficult to combat those. So, but the biggest thing is more officers, because if we pay a little bit more upfront, because either way we're paying for the coverage. So we're going to pay the overtime and trying to get the coverage, in which we are having a very difficult time right now, making the coverage that we need to provide. And our officers are doing a fabulous job. They're working very hard. My concern with them is the officer wellness, the fatigue setting in and such. They're running call to call to call. There's other things that we like to do, not to get off on a tangent here, but other things that we like to do, especially with community policing and whatnot, that we just don't have the time and the resources right now to do those types of things. So.
Councilwoman, are you done?
Hi, Chief.
Hi, ma'am.
The one thing that I would like to ask is, I think everybody would appreciate also the statistics, well, that's a hard word to say at times, of what's going on with the crime in the city. How are we coping with that? And how does that justify everything, with the cost? We don't have any records of this. We have laid low because you've been new to the position, and I know you've had a lot on your plate, especially like you said with COVID, but we have no idea of where we stand in the city statistically wise, as far as where crime and what's going on. What is the approach and what's going on with that?
Well, right now we've been putting statistics on Crime Watch. We've been putting them on there to get real in depth right now. And one of the problems that we have is our record management system and keeping track of statistics. So to provide a full on report, we have to do it manually and do it ourselves. And it makes it very difficult. So we were hoping that if we can get some software in place to help with this, a better record management system, or to make the record management system we have now work better, that we can provide more stats. But we are putting some stats out on Crime Watch right now we did it since August, and we just did today. We did for November. So
Yeah, that's one thing I think we all, appreciate, knowing where we stood this past year, really year and a half, 2 years almost. It's been very difficult all the way around.
That's right.
And I think we're all trying to get back on track again with where we want to be. And, and as everybody's saying, every dollar counts here, and time is money, and so on and so forth. And as you're saying, to hire another police officer, you're going to try and alleviate some of your overtime, but also, as you said, the 2 retirees that you're talking about, what is that going to take us to once they retire?
In terms of
How many
numbers,
men? How many people?
if they retired, that would
Mhm.
take us down to 45.
Okay, okay. And how soon is the retirement? Do you know?
We have one in January and one in April.
Okay, so it's the next few months. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Mackey.
Not so much a budget question, but you talked about officers running from call to call. Do you have an average number of calls? I know that each shift is kind of different. Could you give us some idea? And you don't have to do it tonight. I think it would just be good for some context. Because when you are running from call to call to call, you do lose that community policing. And then you also, there's a burnout factor there, and, you know, not intentionally, but minor details start to get missed, and it's dangerous for the officers and for the residents of Williamsport. So I would be interested to know how many calls are we looking at here, average per shift, are officers responding to?
Absolutely. We could break that down per shift. I don't have that answer for you right now. We have the response to incidents on Crime Watch that we put for the stats. But for a breakdown, if you could write that note down, but for a breakdown for each shift, absolutely can make that happen.
Any other questions? Just to piggyback on the local cooperation. UPMC has their own officers now, correct?
Yes, sir. They're a little bit different. They're not like a regular police department. They're like a
Okay.
private police department, and they have limitations, which are UPMC. So soliciting help from them is not going to happen for
I
mutual aid.
was, actually, I was wondering more, has that alleviated any of our need to be on their campus for different?
There's been a couple times where they've been able to handle some things that we have not, but the major stuff we're still typically.
You're still,
handling.
okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yep.
Just wondered what that effect was. Any other questions on page 34? Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me just follow up on my questions on mutual aid and Randy's comment. It just made me kind of spur an additional, maybe deeper dive question. So when we receive mutual aid, I'm assuming that's feet on the street, probably. It's responding to a call or what have you. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes, we make a request. So the request has to come from the jurisdiction. So if we want to make a request to another jurisdiction for help, we have to make a request to them, and then they will come and respond. So
Okay.
for example, if we have a critical incident or, you know, something serious that happens, that takes up a lot of our officers' time, you know, an accident scene or something, and then we still have calls coming in. This allows them to come in and help answer a call for us.
Okay. If we wanted to expand that, could we? And if we could, why have we, or why haven't we asked for mutual aid in other areas of the police department that we do, whether it's the SRT investigations,
Well,
to free up?
you're getting off on something different. That's totally different. You're starting to get in the grounds of regionalization and talking about
Okay.
things like that. So I'm always open to conversation about that stuff. But for mutual aid, and that's a little bit different. It's on a
Okay.
need, mutual aid comes from on a needed basis. So if we need them, so it's not a pre-established setup in terms of we're going to bring in another jurisdiction to come and handle calls for us, because they got to handle their own, and just understand the reciprocation as well. So when they call for our help on a mutual aid, if they request our help, we're going to help them as well.
Okay.
So it goes back and forth.
Okay, no, I appreciate that very much. One more follow-up question. So speaking of regionalization, I mean, everybody talks about it. The county talks about it. Every municipality around here talks about it. We see it in other parts of the county. We don't see it in the center of the county and the city. What are we doing to lead that effort, specifically in the police department with regionalization between yourself, the mayor? Where do we sit with that?
Well, one of the things is this the first time it's been brought up to me. I've heard lots of people talk about regionalization and stuff, but nobody's come and talked to me about it.
Okay.
So this actually is the first time that the question has come. Be very straightforward with you. Regionalization is very difficult. So I think if it could have happened, we would have been regionalized by now. I don't know about too many third-class cities that have regionalized. It's typically usually smaller police departments that regionalize. So it's not nothing I would never turn away from. I would absolutely sit down and have conversations about it, but this is the first time anybody's approached me about regionalization.
Certainly. Yeah, I would agree. It's probably not, we would probably be the exception as a third-class city. Certainly a great opportunity, though, for us to innovate and try to be a leader in the state within that effort. So I'd ask you over the next year, while you're looking at the models of other cities, let's start to take an active role in trying to lead those efforts.
And I have it. It looks good on paper, but it's very difficult to make happen.
Yeah, certainly,
So
certainly. Mayor Slaughter, do you have anything to offer, comment on to with regionalization as well? I know we've talked about that last year during our budget. That was something that I'd asked of you back in January as well. So just, is there any update in that realm?
Sure. So, as I travel to conferences around the state, what appears to be the one I was just at PML actually in Lancaster was regional training centers. It seems very difficult to actually regionalize, as the chief was alluding to. You have pensions, you have contracts, unions, and it's not going to be, a free cost. If Hughesville or Muncie or whomever is coming into the city, it's going to be a cost to either their taxpayers, our taxpayers. So, and there's a lot of, legacy items in there. So what they talked about actually at Lancaster was regional training facilities seem to be sort of the what folks are looking into, as opposed to full-blown regionalization, which would be extremely difficult listening. It was specifically a national sort of speakers that were there talking during that session, Chicago and other places that were Philadelphia, former police commissioner, things of that nature. And they said this was looked at and it was extremely difficult to make happen, just given all the different moving parts they're paid. It's a little bit easier, the conversation, at least maybe with fire, because it's a lot of volunteer, not paid departments. But we are exploring it. As you said, Lancaster, I'll reach out to them as well. I've spoken to Mayor Sirachi many times, and she's obviously on PML too. So I will, continue conversations with her, with other mayors around the state to see. But, regionalization, as Chief said, I think if it was as easy as what folks might think, it would already happen. But it's a conversation we continue to have. And maybe the way to start is the regional training facilities, maybe, and then go from there. But that's kind of where the conversation was.
Yeah, that's a great feedback and a great update. I hope we, if that's a starting point, then I think that's great. I hope we can continue to put forth the effort, even if it is difficult, to try to work towards that. It's a potential solution to all of what we're discussing regarding the police department and frankly, everything that we're looking at in the city. So I hope we don't give up on it. It's a great opportunity to innovate and be the first in the state, which could provide a good model for other municipalities to even expand their abilities fiscally and otherwise. So thank you both.
yes, sir.
I think if we're being realistic, the chief impediment to regionalization really is the fact that there are a number of municipalities nearby that are not required to provide their own police service and pay no fee to utilize state police service. And so the issue with regionalization becomes, when you're getting it for free, why would you pay? And so the solution in some ways, I think, probably lies at the state level, but that's hit a wall several times. It's not that it's impossible, but some of our best efforts might be put toward lobbying at the state level to change that scenario in Pennsylvania, because I don't know to what extent that's common in other regions, but it's certainly a big issue in the state of PA. And one of a number of issues that third-class cities face, with their outlying municipalities. Actually, that's the only other question that I wanted to ask, and sorry, I lost track of it there for a sec, was Mayor Slaughter, talk to me a little bit about the discussion that we've been having within the ARPA funding debates. The whole idea of like kind of a mental health force operating within our police force, and what we're looking at there, and what we're considering there, and how that might impact the way in which we police in the city.
Sure. So, and chiefs can speak to that as well, but we're waiting on the DOJ grant right now. We actually should be hearing about that almost any day. We've applied to that, and everyone has signed on board to that. UPMC, Geisinger, local health, mental health providers. And essentially, there would be a critical intervention team that would respond to those mental health, behavioral health. And the goal would be to have it, move everything up front to get the evaluation instead of sending them, if it is a true mental health or behavioral health situation, get them evaluated, get them the help needed. Obviously, if it's a violent crime committed, we'd have to handle that clearly. But if it's a mental health case, there's no, violent crime per se, get them the help they need instead of sitting in a county prison, for example, and then getting an evaluation 3 or 6 months down the line. So, working with the DAs on board, DA Gardner as well, in that if we don't, where ARPA comes in, the discussion we were having, if we don't get the grant, which obviously we don't know yet or not, we could deploy some of our ARPA funds to assist with this program, the mental health and behavioral health, which I'm obviously a big proponent of. I think it's going to be a great program. The chiefs have done a lot of legwork. In a perfect world, they would get the UPMC or some other local area for evaluation. Geisinger's building 2 new facilities right now, not locally, but not too far away. I think one is in Danville and the other is in the Wilkes-Barre area, I believe. And so, if those are inpatient facilities, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, Geisinger has written a letter of support, UPMC has, but there's nothing set in stone. So I can't speak for Geisinger, obviously. I can't speak for UPMC. So I don't want, this to get out there like Geisinger is going to do this. This is sort of a perfect scenario. But I did have conversations with Geisinger. I've had conversations with PMC, chiefs had as well with local folks. And so to get that mental health or behavioral health support provided so that it's not that repetitive nature of folks continue to have mental health or behavioral health episodes, interaction with law enforcement, they go to prison for 30 days or 60 days, come back out, have another episode, and not actually getting the help that they need or, in the placement that they need, I guess, so to speak. So that would be the ultimate goal of the behavioral health and mental health team that would be deployed. Now, we have to be very careful because it's still, if law enforcement is called, you still have to make sure that the scene is safe. So it's not, some people will say, can we just have a social worker respond? In some instances, maybe, but I think initially, and they can speak to the law enforcement side, obviously more so than I can, but you have to, secure the scene, make sure it's safe. And if there is no, violent threat or some along those lines, then, law enforcement could back off, maybe social workers could take over. But right now, what we've been having discussions is some type of hybrid team where, critical intervention team, behavioral health, mental health, social worker, EMT, maybe a firefighter and an officer respond and then evaluate the situation, get the folks the help they need and go from there. If there's a crime committed, this is not, I want to be clear, this doesn't get folks out of committing a crime. If a crime is committed, a crime is committed. Clearly that lies with the DA for charges and things of that nature. However, if it's just a mental health episode and we can provide the assistance, that's the goal with this program. So Tom Keller and his team in DC are working on this grant. It's been submitted and I have a call with them next week. So we'll get an update. I should have an update then on this grant.
And the scope of the grant is effectively implementation of a program like this, or
It
simply a planning grant?
No, so it's $100,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's $100,000 for planning
Mhm.
and 400 or 500 for implementation.
Got it.
And I can.
So that would get us all the way there. I guess part of my question is that actually sounds to me a little bit like a regional effort, correct?
In a behavioral mental health sense, I guess. I mean, they could speak to that more than I could.
Yes, it's essentially a task force.
Right.
So the idea is to get a bunch of people on board and it's going to be a cross training. That's what he meant by a hybrid team. So
Right.
if we
But so I
get-
guess what I'm saying is we're working with folks from potentially UPMC or potentially Geisinger, right, as well as city police, potentially fire. That sounds to me like we're approaching something that might be a regional effort. And
Yes.
understanding we don't necessarily have this data right on hand, but to what extent, what number of our calls do we think are mental health or behavioral health related?
Statistics are 1 in 10. So 1 in 10 call or subjects that we're dealing with out in the street has a mental health issue or episode that we're dealing with. So
Okay. So certainly if we could figure out a way to lessen the number of those episodes and or to get those people the help that they need, it would lower our call volume.
Yes, absolutely. With the training, cross training between professionals and first
Mhm.
responders, it allows opportunities to deal with subjects, have an understanding and be able to identify what episodes are there. They have such things as using apps
Mhm.
that a person that does suffer from a mental illness, they can pre-populate all their information into it so that we can use an app. And if we have to go deal with that person at a later time, we already have a list of what they might be suffering from to help better deal with. So
That's great. Okay, well, that sounds promising, certainly. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I guess it all comes back to a budgetary question, but can we utilize a program like this, not just to provide better service and more comprehensive service to our citizens, but to lessen the burden on the police department specifically by utilizing members of other professions that can serve, possibly serve on some of these calls more effectively than our police officers can.
absolutely. Right now, what happens with, if we are dealing with a subject, that police officer may be taken off the street for a shift that has to stay with that subject
Right.
now and keep an eye on them, as opposed to having a program in place where we can put them somewhere where they get the help that they need, frees up that officer
To come
to
back
be
on
out in the
shift.
street.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Excellent. So that sounds like a promising development, at least, or hopefully. Thanks, guys.
Just to follow up on a comment that Councilwoman Mealy made regarding the obligation of what we have to provide. For clarity's sake, if I'm not mistaken, legally, from a public safety perspective, we're only obligated legally to provide a paid fire department. We don't have to have a professional police department. That doesn't mean we shouldn't. We absolutely should. With a city as our makeup, our population, the demographics that we have, we absolutely should. The only reason I say that is we have the same flexibility as far as rules that other surrounding municipalities have. Kind of thinking outside the box of how we can utilize them could also go a long ways to help us provide more and even better service within the budget constraints we have. I just wanted to clarify that point. And it's kind of the background of, I think, some of my questions with regionalization, mutual aid, et cetera. So thank you.
sure.
Chief, that figure again, did you say 1 out of 3? Was
For mental health subjects,
Yeah.
it's 1 in 10.
1 in 10?
Yeah.
Okay. So roughly 10%.
Yes, sir.
That's a significant figure.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, sounds promising, though. I think in the context of public safety and policing, the fact that a lot of the, not a lot, I'm going to say a good portion of the problems that the police face are really societal things. Not always, a straight up burglary or something like that. And we know that we're fraying at the edges in some areas in society, but we come to police or in the teaching profession, we're expecting people that are trained specifically to do certain things, to handle things that they're not actually trained to do. And that's when it breaks down. So it's really encouraging to hear this element being developed and looked into. I think it's something we need to do more of rather than less of. It's not a feel-good kind of thing. It's not brushing things under the rug. It's really addressing the specific problems head on, in a way that they need to be addressed, and bring the individuals involved to a good place rather than one size fits all.
Yes, sir.
So it's great. Councilman Banks.
Chief, what percentage of your calls are domestics? I'm only saying this because when I was doing my ride-alongs with the police department, we had a good number of domestic calls we went on. And, once you make sure that the scene is safe, having that person in place that could be a mediator might free up officers. Because I think we had, 3 or 4 officers on scene for domestic that was non-violent, so.
Yes,
do-
sir.
Do you have that?
Yeah, there's a little
information
different, right now for our crime stats that we did for November, from October to November. In October, the domestic disturbances we responded to 87 incidences. And then this month of November, we responded to 82 incidents. Well, those are the other ones that were called to police, so.
No,
Is
like
that what you
of
mean?
all the calls, like how many
Oh,
calls?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you said. So, go ahead.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
good evening, President Allison, Vice President Mealy, members of the council. Every month, we, on average, handle roughly a little over 1,000 calls that are calls for service for police. And it varies depending on how many officers we have, what we can actually respond to. In October, we handled 1,091 calls. In November, just this past month, that's actually gone down, 925 calls we handled. However, we also had quite a lot less of ability to handle the calls because we were down on manpower. So, and the calls, a lot of them, some of them are, we have a number of different categories that we maintain for different types of calls. It's not all simple calls. But for the most part, we do try and carry stats and show you the comparison for the major crimes, as well as some of the nuisance issues from month to month. So if you go on here, you can take a look, you'll see on our page, which is our Crime Watch page, which is actually williamsportpd.org. If you go to that, it'll have a breakdown of what we are compared month to month, especially in specific categories that we're following. And as we expand our capabilities technologically, we'll be able to show more of a deep dive into how we respond to these calls, as well as overtime is on here as well. And you'll notice that because call volume's down and because our manpower is down, we didn't have the ability to handle some of the more proactive criminal aspects to try and stop some of the things that happen on the street. So, okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Appreciate it.
Does this also break it down into in neighborhoods at all?
At this time with the software we have, ma'am, no, we don't have that ability to deep dive into that. We're looking to expand into that to show how
Because
we
that
can
would
break it
probably
down.
help, wouldn't it, eventually to know exactly where the problem areas are on a whole?
Yeah, it's always good to have that information so that we can more strategically place officers and handle calls. Again, we're exploring better, newer technologies to have that information to disseminate to ourselves and to the public.
This is the second time software has been brought up. Is any of this in your budget for software?
We're exploring options to do that. Right now, we are maintaining the RMS, the record management system that we have. There's some talks right now with the salesperson to help us out to get a better usage out of it. So right now, we actually made the purchase for the radios. So, and it's the same person, same company. Motorola, they own Spillman. So in talking to that representative, we are right now in the midst of trying to get a meeting together to get a better use out of Spillman. So
There is possibilities of using the same software, but adding on to it then, the same company?
we will see.
Okay.
We're trying to establish meetings right now to see what they can do better for us. It's a program we've had since 2014 and we haven't had much change since then. So we're trying to explore our options. We are looking at other record management systems that may be more beneficial to the department and the city.
I think I'm asking this only because when this first came up, when this program came into the police department, we were also told we could combine it with codes and fire, and it just didn't work out that way.
Correct. Yeah, I
And
can't
that's why
speak-
I'm asking
yeah.
this.
Yeah, I can't speak for.
Hopefully it does, that we don't have to go to another company, because then I think that would also, then you'd have to integrate what you have already, which was a problem to begin with. It took a lot of time to integrate what you have now.
Yes,
So, okay, thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Everybody good? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Move on to purchases services. Purchases services, we have investigative expense for the 2022 proposed budget would be $10,000. For training, we're looking at $52,000. Police Academy, we're nothing in that line item right now. I would defer to Mr. Pollock on that one. Travel, we have $2,000. Subscription and dues, $4,000. Medical is $3,000. Contract services, $64,000. And utilities are set at $7,500 right now. Subtotal purchase of services is $142,500. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you still doing a lot of training in-house?
As much as we can.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am.
And so not a lot is going out of house then? Because that's what we were told was going on. So the increase in training is the cost of has gone up.
Yeah, each year training, we're finding that the cost of each training is going up with the year, just the inflation of rates. So the training is going up. But yes, we are trying to do as much in-house as we can. For instance, we're sending officers to get certified as firearms instructors so we can do our own instruction in-house. And right now, defensive tactics and less lethal options that we're all trying to do and take care of that. And those certifications in the department. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Just to play the devil's advocate, I'm assuming the lack of funding in the police academy line relates to the fact that the department won't be taking on any new officers this year.
Well, we do have new officers, but I believe, if I'm speaking out of turn here, Mr. Pollock, that is, if that's something that we would end up spending, that would come from the salaries.
That is how it works. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. When you said you wanted Joe to address it, I assumed there was something going on there. I guess part of my question is, but it would come out of the salaries one way or the other. If we were adding an additional officer, whether or not we would have to be looking at budgeting additional funds there. Joe, I'm guessing the cost of an additional officer is somewhere around 80 to 85 in total, pensions, healthcare.
Without retirement, I'm guessing 75 to 100, 75 for a single, 100 for family.
Okay.
That just an estimate, just looking at numbers right now, I'd have to,
Got it. And that's pre-pension calculation. You're
without
saying.
any retirement.
Got
correct.
it.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? from Council?
Okay, moving on to supplies and materials. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, we're looking at $18,000 for the 2022 proposed budget. COVID supplies, nothing this year. Gas and oil is listed at 65,000. Fingerprint and photo is not a cost to us. Because now that the county is taking the fingerprint and photo over for us. Uniforms, 35,000. Uniforms, which would be initial issue, is 35,000 as well. Firearms and ammunition, we're looking at 43,500. Support equipment, we're looking at 19,000. And communications, looking at 18,500. Subtotal supplies and materials is $234,000.
Councilwoman Katz.
Chief, where are they doing fingerprint and photos now? Since we're out of City Hall?
Well, right now, we're in a transition, so we're taking all of our equipment and it's getting moved to our new facility. So they're working on getting that set up now. So hopefully within the next week or two, we'll be able to start doing it again at our department.
Where here or where at?
On Nichols Place. That's the-
Okay,
yep, yes, ma'am.
museum, okay.
Well, I asked it last year, so I'll ask it again this year. There's a pretty dramatic increase in the firearms and ammunition.
Yes.
So what's that due to?
One of the things is we did purchase ammunition this year and with the difficulty in acquiring ammunition, we haven't received it yet. So there's about almost a $16,000 cost to purchase the ammunition that we needed for the department. So we're in essence, we're playing catch up. So then I wanted to purchase more, so double that. So, and get ourselves caught up again, because I have a feeling it's going to continue on and it's going to go. On top of that, we're looking at for range fees. We have to utilize a range. We're looking at between $1,500 and $2,000 to utilize range for our department. And then two, I also added on, there might be the possibility of we have to purchase 5 additional tasers for replacement.
So two things to follow up on Councilman Banks' question. What's the shelf life of ammunition?
To be honest with you, I couldn't tell you. It's going to last for a little while.
Okay.
So
And could you just remind me again, support equipment? That's at 19,000. It looks like we're only at 4893.
yeah, the support equipment, it kept the same because one of the issues was last year's budget was put on to purchase a fax machine copier. So they were looking at options to buy it right out as opposed to lease it. So we're exploring those options. We're gonna have to buy an additional one for services for our property and evidence as well. So we're looking into those options. What's going to be better for us to buy one outright or to do a lease that could help with maintenance costs. So I kept that the same there for this year. One of the reasons, obviously, us moving was one of the reasons for not looking for a new printer fax machine right now. So I opted to keep that the same.
Any other questions? Okay. Last part.
Okay, continuing on to equipment repairs. We have vehicle repairs. We're looking at about $40,000 this year. Radio repairs, none. As I said, we purchased the new radios. I'm told that we should be receiving them by the end of the year. And as we said before, there's a 5-year warranty on those. So I don't see the need for any radio repairs funds. Radio maintenance contract, $1,800. Computer equipment, looking at $13,000. Subtotal equipment for equipment repairs is $54,800.
And the last,
And then the last one, equipment for a vehicle lease purchase, looking at $110,000.
okay. And the grand total is,
$9,983,016. Then if you add the extra for an officer, $53,574, which would be for the 48th officer.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Councilman Yoder.
Quick question on the radios. Did you say we're going to have them by the end of the year?
Yes.
I could have swore we weren't expecting them till in the spring time. I thought there was a really long lead time on those from when we approved that last month. Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but I could have swore that was part of the urgency of those.
All I could say is I just talked to the representative. He just provided an email yesterday and said that he put the purchase in for the radios and that we should have them by the end of the year barring any issues. So,
Good news. Thanks.
yes, sir.
Great. Councilwoman Neely.
Thanks. Just a quick question. About the lower budget for vehicle repairs from last year, despite the fact that we actually went dramatically over budget last year.
Yes, the anticipation is because of the 4 new vehicles purchased. And right now we are in talks with Enterprise again and just got some confirmed numbers that I was going to bring to council, hopefully here within the next week or two for discussion. So the potential is to get on with Enterprise, get 6 additional vehicles, which would give us a total of 10. So thought that would mitigate the repairs cost.
Okay. So then tell me what the vehicle lease purchase line includes precisely.
Breaking down the vehicles right now, what we're looking at for that is the $41,000, the first the 5 payments for the 4 that we leased.
Right.
And then in addition, initially it was for 8 vehicles that we were looking at with Enterprise.
Mhm.
We might be able to offset that a little bit because of the purchase of the 4 or the lease buy option of the 4 vehicles that we just got. So if we get 8 vehicles, there's an upfront cost of 50%. So it'd be 56,000, 7,000 for each vehicle. So
Okay.
that's the upfront cost. And it's almost $1,000 a month for the end cost. So you're looking at $12,000 for the 2022 budget.
Okay, so 7,000 upfront for 8 is 56 plus 12,000 is 68. So yeah, we're right there at 110. Got
Yes,
it.
ma'am.
Okay, so that's for 8. You think that we might be able to get away with 6 this year, which would lower the cost?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to bring that proposal to council hopefully within the next week or two Just this last week with talking with representatives of Enterprise, they're actually able to give us a number in terms of cost
Okay.
that we've been waiting for. So
And the $1,000 per month is not per vehicle, it's for the 8 vehicles?
that's, yeah, it would be for all of them.
Okay, so that breaks down to 125 a
Yes,
car,
because I asked the
basically?
same question, just to be sure.
Okay. I mean, it would be a lot if it were per vehicle. We
Yes.
might just as well buy them.
So, It's actually, the end cost would go over for a period of 5 years, for 60 months.
Okay.
But for budget purposes here, just did the
But so I
12
guess
12
then
months.
for our purposes, if there were only 8 vehicles, we'd be looking at 7, or only 6 vehicles, we'd be looking at $750 a month plus 7,000 upfront for each vehicle, correct?
Rough.
Okay. All right. Wanted to make sure there wasn't a scaling up sort of discount or something. Okay, all right, well, we'll look forward to talking about that further. Just so you know, Chief, because I think there's some confusion about the dates of our upcoming council meetings. We have one tomorrow, one next Thursday, and then with the exception of the fact that Chief Killian's going to make us come in sometime over the over the break. Well, I don't think we have another scheduled meeting until January.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
No other questions? Okay, that's it. Thank you very much,
Thank you. I
gentlemen.
appreciate your time.
Quite welcome. Good discussion. It's always good when we get beyond just the pure dollars and cents to the reasoning behind it. Okay, then we're on to the fire department, page 30. And welcome, Chief Killian.
Good evening, President Allison, Vice President Mealy, members of council. What are we doing tonight?
Good, how about you?
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, so starting off with the fire department, general budget, just want to verify that you got the update from Mr. Pavlak this afternoon. So presenting the correct one. Okay, so for personnel services, salaries line item, $2,366,001. Overtime, $210,000. FICA, $38,600. Life insurance, $27,800. Workers' comp, $90,500. Pensions for non-uniform be $0. Pensions, $1,180,775. Health insurance, $2,450,000. Severance pay of $30,000 for a subtotal of personnel services of $6,393,676. Moving on to purchase of services, water and sewer, $3,500, light and power, $13,000, heat, $11,000, fire prevention and investigation, $6,000, training, $50,000, travel, $23,000, telephones at $18,000, subscription and dues of $3,000, and subtotal purchase of services of $127,500. I'll do it for page 30.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Questions or comments? Councilman Yoder.
Chief Killian, just to clarify, the updated proposal brings us up to 35. Is that correct?
It's actually 35.5.
0.5.
So yeah, so let me give you a little background on that. We had 35 personnel budgeted in 2021, 34 firefighters between line and administration, and 1 administrative aide. Our administrative aide left us in May and moved up to RVT, which left that position open. In midsummer, after we, again, like I've spoke with you about before, in our strategic planning process and looking at the department, we are an incredibly young department. We have about 55% of our membership has 6 years or less. So when I became fire chief, we went from 3 administrative chiefs to 2 administrative chiefs, and we lost the assistant chief that was, which was myself at that point, doing training and fire prevention and investigation type things. So we made a proposal to Mayor Slaughter back in August to take that administrative aide position and not fill that position, but promote an assistant chief to really deal with the department training with the youth of the department. So that kept us at 35 people in, through 2021. So the 2022 budget, let me back up a second, I apologize. So in the proposal to promote that assistant chief, so that third administrative member, Chief Shank, who was promoted, is retiring in September of 2022. So as part of that proposal, it was that in the summer, next summer, we will reevaluate that position and determine whether that is a position that we would, obviously we'd like to keep it, but determine if that's a position that we need to keep and we can afford to keep, to maintain that third administrative chief. So that's the variation that you're seeing with the elimination, specifically the non-uniform pension. So for the 2022 budget, that includes the 35 fire department positions. And then we did add a part-time, approximately 20-hour-a-week position for basically as the administrative aide for some secretarial work, but also to leverage some of our community risk reduction programs, work with a little more public outreach in our fire prevention arena. Some of the things that we're doing, we're trying to do from I'll say overall prevention standpoint. But the full-time position that our administrative aide filled previously, bumping that down to a part-time position. Does that answer your question?
Answers it perfectly.
right.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
No, the only point I would make, I would just reiterate the same point that I brought up with the police department. It costs us about $191,000 to deploy one firefighter in the city. And I hate to pick on you and the chief of police. You're the two largest departments, easiest to compare. Looking at whatever other cities are doing, applying what they're doing could save us about $700,000, right? So I know you're up to the task. I would just challenge you, just like I did with Chief Snyder. Let's learn what other municipalities are doing, and let's see how we can maximize what we're doing based off of lessons from them, because they're doing something different. It seems to be working, and it could help us free up some resources. We just talked about yesterday in finance, purchasing a fire truck. That's a pretty good down payment for a fire truck.
Yeah.
And we would have that every year. So just a challenge, and I know you're up for it.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. I'm on the executive board of the Pennsylvania Career Fire Chiefs Association. So we have about 60, 70 members of career fire departments, that the fire chiefs of career fire departments all across the state. And we're in constant communication over those types of things. What's everybody doing different? The conversation's taking place now from a regionalization standpoint. So we're pushing as hard as we can.
Yeah.
And I will definitely echo Chief Snyder's comments. From regionalization is really easy to talk about. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
There is a lot of barriers in our way. But for us, the difference with us from a fire department standpoint is other municipalities aren't paying for fire protection, or if they are paying it, they're paying a very, very nominal fee. We're in the city of Williamsport. You're going to get an immediate response with trained firefighters. Our response time is less than 60 seconds out the door, and within 5 minutes throughout the city. So we've got a great thing going for us having that professional fire department. But to your point, we are constantly in conversations to try to make this stuff happen.
Yeah. And it shows. When you look at other similar third-class cities, you're much closer to, from an efficiency standpoint, what they're doing. There's still more we could learn for sure. But you're doing it, and it's good to see. And I would just encourage you to keep it up. And I know it's difficult, but I think you're making good progress early on, and I just keep doing it.
Appreciate that. Appreciate all of your help with that through that process too.
Other comments, questions? Okay. Carry on.
All right, moving on to supplies and materials. General office supplies, $3,000. Cleaning supplies, $4,000. Gas and oil, $21,600. Uniforms, $28,000. Protective clothing of $24,000. Other supplies, $4,000. COVID-19 supplies, $2,500. Fire hydrants and laterals, $2,500. For subtotal supplies and materials of $89,600. Repairs and maintenance. Vehicle repairs, $65,000. Communications, $5,000. Miscellaneous repairs, $6,500. Contract services, $15,000. Facility maintenance, $50,000. For a subtotal of repairs and maintenance of $141,500. Equipment, Support equipment at $45,000. And that subtotal of equipment would be $45,000 for total department expense of $6,797,276.
Thank you, Chief. Question, Councilwoman Katz.
Hi, Chief. You put in here COVID supplies for 2,500.
Yep.
The police department didn't put any COVID supplies. Is there a reason why you did and they didn't?
I think the fire department has been kind of the procurer of the COVID supplies between police and fire.
Okay.
And we anticipate, we're sitting on a pretty good stock. So let's knock on wood and hope we don't have to spend a penny of that next year.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be why, we're acquiring that, we're procuring that. We normally get the medical equipment, so we procure that and then give
Then you
PD
share
what they
it.
need.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And the other thing too, the support equipment.
What is it?
Yeah, what is that?
Sure. So support equipment is really our line item to buy new tools and equipment. So the best way I can put that is every year in support equipment, I basically use a zero-based budget for that line item specifically. And we look at what are our needs for the upcoming year. So for next year, we have SCBAs, the breathing apparatus that we wear on our back. We have cylinders that need to be hydrostatically tested. Every 7 years, they're required to be tested. So that is about a $10,000 expense. So that comes out of support equipment. We have a hydraulic ram for vehicle extrication. Our current hydraulic rams are about 35 years old. They're in need of replacement. So it's what replaces those older, the older tools and equipment that we need. And support equipment, we cut $20,000 out of that line item this year. I originally asked for $65,000. We were asked to reduce that, and that $20,000 was actually our SCBA replacement program. So we, from a planning standpoint, we budget 2 new breathing apparatus per year to maintain the NFPA life cycle on that breathing apparatus. So in 2021 and now in 2022, we've had to remove that from the budget. So we're, putting us a little further behind on that replacement plan cycle.
I'm trying to remember, breathing apparatus.
Mhm.
You came up with this, I think, a couple of years ago, where you had a problem. You were short supply with the breathing apparatus. Is there still a problem? Is this what
Yes.
you're stating?
Yeah, so we have them. We're not in short supply, but it gets down to the issue like the police department is having with radios, like we had with radios several years. As we trim the budget, what we're doing is we're trimming the planning that we put into the budget. So, every year we have, so firefighter turnout gear, the personal protective equipment we need. We budget for 6 to 8 sets of that per year to maintain the life cycle of that gear. Those SCBAs, we have about 33 of them total. So we budget to replace 2 of them every year to maintain a 15-year rotational cycle on those. So what's going to happen, a few years down the road is we're going to get to the point where we've got these SCBAs, which they are our lifeline, basically it'd be like a firearm for a police officer, that are multiple NFPA cycles out of date that, we're going to run into potential maintenance issues with. So just, I just wanted to bring that point up that, that's something that we took out of that support equipment line item that for the second year in a row, that down the road will be an issue when we say, hey, we need to buy 10 SCBAs at $10,000 a piece.
This is why I'm asking you, because I can remember this problem a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
and it's something that's vitally important to our firemen.
We're trying really hard to plan.
Okay.
That's been asked, council's asked that multiple times. We're doing our best with that. But, unfortunately, we look at that plan and go, where can we, where's the best place to take some of that funds from? We absolutely cannot take money away from the hydrostatic testing. That's a requirement. I have to have that done. But it's one of those things where the purchase of SCBAs, we can push that off a
Okay.
couple more years. I don't like to do it. I don't want to, but if we have to do it, that's what,
Okay.
That's what we have to do.
That's why I was asking this
Mhm.
question. Thank you.
Doing a little dance here. I hate to do this to everybody, but can we go back to page 30? You don't really.
That's a big
Yeah,
ask.
Yeah.
Come on,
Let's
Dave.
get our DeLorean with a
Dave.
capacitor. The training budget went up
Yes, sir.
$20,000.
We're hiring 4 firefighters. Yep, we've made conditional offers. We'll be sending 1 firefighter to the academy in January for his EMT and then his firefighter certifications. And we'll be sending 3 in end of February, beginning of March. So that increase you're seeing is just the cost of the fire academy, about $5,000 per firefighter.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
To kind of piggyback on a question that Councilwoman Katz had related to COVID-19 supplies, that's littered, and this is probably more of a question for the mayor. That's littered throughout the budget, and I think yours is the only one that has it. There might be one other one. I believe all of that is reimbursable with ARPA funding, and I believe there are other expenses that we are incurring outside of that are reimbursable with ARPA funding. I know we don't have a revenue line item for that, as we discussed Wednesday. Is the administration looking at plans of where we can use that funding to reimburse expenses? I know we don't have an agreed upon plan for ARPA, but from, I think, some conversations that I've had with most everybody up here, I think we all generally agree that that is something we should utilize that money for.
So I can speak to that, sir, for a small portion of that. As far as, so specifically, let's talk about overtime.
Mhm.
You know, you see our overtime budget, and I'm frankly shocked the question wasn't asked. All right, we're going to be $30,000+ over in overtime this year. And the reason behind that is multifaceted. Number one, we were understaffed, but COVID was a significant reason for that. So we're sitting on right now a $33,000 DOJ grant for COVID supplies and overtime. That grant will be getting drawn down here before Christmas to help fill some of these holes. But we are tracking all of our COVID-related expenses for that exact reason.
Okay.
So we can say, hey, at the end of the year, we've had X amount of dollars in COVID-related expenses. The grant did not cover this much. This is how much we'll need from other, from potential, the ARPA use, the first round of COVID funding last year.
So are you doing that just for the fire department? Or are you doing that across the entire general fund?
We're doing that. I'll say between Joe and I, we're doing that across you're looking at me funny. Between Joe and I, we're doing that across the entire general fund.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. We don't have to do it today. I would be interested to see what that looks like for
Yep.
2021, even going back to 2020. I don't recall from the rules if that's retroactive backwards, but it's good to know we're at least tracking that.
So
I'd be interested to see what that looks like.
Yeah, so I can tell you, ARPA, I can't say for sure whether that's retroactive, but the DOJ
I don't
grant,
remember.
the DOJ grant that we received in the initial round of COVID funding covered all of our COVID-related expenses up to ARPA, as far as overtime and supplies and equipment go.
Gotcha. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, to that point, it would be good if you could bring that to the finance committee.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, we can do that. I'll work with Joe
disseminate
on
it
that. Yep.
through the ranks. Thank you. Oh, the vehicle repairs.
Mhm.
65,000. Is there a chance that when we get the new vehicle that
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. But
Okay.
as a reminder, we won't see that till mid-2023.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but and we're, and
'Cause I
that
expect-
vehicle repairs is a projection.
Yeah.
So that's a trend line, on a
That may
graph.
climb in
Yes.
the interim.
So
yeah.
this year, I can tell you as of today, we are at $60,000 in our vehicle repair line item. So we're
Mhm.
$7,000 over budget as of today,
Right.
with a month left of the year. We've had some substantial vehicle issues, as I've laid out to the majority of
Mhm.
you so far. So be the reason for that.
Yeah.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Helps on the way, but
Yes.
be a little bit.
Be a little bit.
Okay, are there, Councilwoman Mealy?
I'm just going to make this point here, not directly as a commentary on the fire department over any other department in the city, but just because it occurred to me when Councilwoman Katz asked you about, some element of
Support
spending in
equipment.
here. Yeah, support equipment. A couple of years ago, the city started doing budget narratives. Joe, 2-3 years ago, something like that. But we took a look at Lancaster's budget, and Lancaster had these gorgeous narratives that actually explained what each line item was being expended for. And this year I noticed that they aren't here. And I guess I just wanted to point that out. Not, like I said, it's not in reference to fire. I just asked a question of the police that could have been answered by the narrative as well. And I have no doubt that we will ask multiple other questions in the course of tonight that could have been covered in a narrative. And then, we could have skipped the public hashing over it. So I just wanted to point out that it would be exceptionally helpful, both for new council people and for those of us who are veterans and can't remember, or for new items that that nobody particularly understands, to maintain those narratives in the budget. They don't need to be beautiful. They don't need to be well written. All they need to do is explain what's going on. And if the administration can make an effort to make certain that happens in 2022, I think that would be for 2023, that is, I think that would be exceptionally helpful to not just to city council, but to the general public, which, looking at a document like this would be completely stymied as to what was going on in the city and what we were spending our money on. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we're done. Thank you, Chief.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to environmental control and codes. Start on page 32. And welcome, Mr. Girardi.
Good evening, President Allison and members of council. What you have before you is the 2022 budget for the Department of Bureau of Codes. Starting with personnel services, salary, overtime, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pension, and health insurance for a subtotal of $789,553. For purchases of service, office rental, $6,600. Contract services, $1,000. Health officer, $3,000. Subscription and dues, $1,000. Training, $5,000. Clean and seal, $20,000 for a subtotal of $36,600. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $6,000. Uniform allowance, $2,500. Gas and oil, $3,500, and support equipment, $20,000 for a grand total, or for a subtotal of $32,000 even. And on the last page, you'll have equipment repair, vehicle equipment repair, $3,500 for a subtotal of $3,500. For grants and gifts, you'll have zoning hearing board, $9,500, Board of Health, $500, and plumbing examiners board, $400 for a subtotal of $10,400. For a grand total for the Bureau of Codes department would be $872,053.
Thank you, Mr. Girardi. Mrs. Katz had her hand up first.
Hi, Joe. How you doing?
Good.
How many people are working in codes now?
We have 4 officers, a zoning officer, a building official, a office manager, and then a part-time street excavation inspector, which is 7.5 to 8 people in the
Okay.
whole department.
So you have 7.5 people.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't hate to say half, but he's part-time.
It's a half.
Yeah.
And he does full-time work. I will say that of Dave.
I was going to say Dave
Yeah,
Columbine.
he is very busy in his job.
He works, I think, 40 hours a week, if not more sometimes. I think that's all the questions I have right now.
Mr. Banks.
You always break the bank here, Joe.
I know.
I was just curious about the office rent. What the difference is there.
I would have to have Joe speak on that.
It's
behalf.
purely just a
That's the
question of
number he gives me and I
curiosity.
put it in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Liz answered it for me. She was saying
It's the square footage in the memo that I provided, or the email that I provided to you guys tonight. So just take each square footage by $11 a square foot, and that should be the
Gotcha.
annual rent.
I think Dave's question was related to the fact that it was $2,700 last year and 65 this year. And the difference there is that we didn't budget anything for rent in the beginning of the year. And so we'll eventually have to transfer a bunch of money into that. But this is since we started paying rent in the trade and transit facilities last year, correct?
Yeah, and codes is one of the latter departments to move out of the city hall
Okay.
facility.
Yeah, so I think we've been there maybe 2 months, at most a month and a half. Probably approximately about a month. We'll probably be there this year, a total of 2 months.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I know I was concerned about the increase in our cost. And then when I thought about it, I realized actually it is just to make the point, as of right now, pending any extraneous expenses and utilities and all that, that's substantially under what our rent numbers were back when we were paying rent, that is to say facility maintenance in City Hall.
Yeah, I know some of these questions seem a little bit trivial, I guess, when we're talking about a couple $100s, but I am curious, the uniform allowance went up 700. Looks like we've only spent 700 so far this year.
Correct. I just put in another request for close to $1,000 for uniforms. Basically, what we do is we try to do it at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, we order things. We do have a newer employee this year who's came in towards the tail end, so he's going to need some additional things for the beginning of the year, and that's why we increased it.
Just out of curiosity, what is the official uniform of the codes department?
Typically, what we do is we have work boots for job sites, steel toe boots. Okay. And then we have a leisure pair of shoes we wear if we go into an apartment and so forth. Khakis are a pair of jeans, which are usually provided by them. They buy their own jeans and so forth. But the shirts, hats, coats, anything of that sort is purchased for them through the city of Williamsport.
And why the jump in the zoning hearing board?
This is the year where we switched from our previous attorney to the new attorney. So the wages are different. If you remember correctly, Mr. Musto had the same bill, I think, for 30 years to the city. He never really increased it. So that's the reason why the increase.
Just kind of piggybacking off of Councilwoman Mealy's comment about the rent. I do believe it is more than what we had used to put in for the rent when we were in City Hall. Is that the comment you made?
I believe it's less.
It's less. Gotcha.
Right.
I couldn't remember if you said more or less, but 2019. Yeah. Last year was an anomaly. But I couldn't remember how you said it. So thank you. But the point I wanted to make though was the rent we're paying, I believe, from previous finance discussions and previous readings of the lease, the rent we were paying went into City Hall operating fund for maintenance of City Hall. This rent does not get used for any of that, if I recall. So it may not necessarily be as an efficient use. Nonetheless, it is less. So it may actually cost us more. And I wanted to take that opportunity just to ask, we don't have anything going into the City Hall operating fund this year. And we are pulling money out of that. We'll still have a balance there, but maybe an opportune time to just ask for an update. Where are we on our progress of looking at City Hall, et cetera? Where are we with all of that?
I can say this much. Of course, you're all aware of the ramps going in at this point. Okay. And so forth. All the other items I would have to defer to Mr. Sanders if John would like to come up and speak. If not, I believe John's in the process of getting a group together so we can communicate within the city to come up with a plan to present to City Council concerning what phases and what we're going to do with the building. If that answers your question.
So we're still planning to plan. Essentially.
Again, I'm going to defer to the mayor or John at this point. Okay.
That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as the ADA work, obviously we submitted that report to you all. As part of the consent decree, we have to create a work plan. So we have to take the ADA report that we just received and put that into a work plan. That's required. That's what I think that's what Joe Girardi's alluding to. We have to put that into a work plan. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So we have the work plan that then goes to the joint committee, which is Randy, myself, Joe, John, members of SIL. So that work plan goes to them, or to all of us, to the committee, joint committee. As far as the City Hall, though, in general, that discussion, we need to, I think, sooner rather than later, have a discussion regarding City Hall, the overall path forward of City Hall. But as far as the specifically to the ADA concerns, obviously the ramp's going in, the other items have to be included in the work plan. As long as we're not in there, obviously the discussion is, we don't need to do any of that at the moment. But the second, when we choose to go back into City Hall, then that work plan starts to be implemented. And so working with us and SIL, we have to go through that work plan. So, but that's required as part of the consent decree with the lawsuit. So I think that was what we were talking about with the plan. We're not planning the plan. The ADA report has to go into that work plan.
Gotcha.
I think it might help if we could report to all of council what's going on with their bi-weekly meetings with the SIL and the consultants. And we're getting down into the weeds that pretty far.
Yeah, that reminded me of something else too. We have two. So the ADA inspector, which is Mark Derry, submitted his report. I'm blanking on her name right now at the moment. Janetta Green, thank you. Janetta is working through the policies and procedures with Molly especially. So we're almost through that. Joe and Gary Narr are working through the ADA inspection to bring that in-house, the ADA coordinator in-house. Janetta is serving as that role right now too, until we have a certified person on staff. Gary Narr is going through that process. He started at the training in Baltimore. So it's kind of a simultaneous agenda here that we're completing. So we have the physical aspect that Mark Derry presented, and then we have the policies, procedures that Janetta is working with Molly on. So, these parallel paths that we have that are required. So, the physical stuff is kind of on hold until we make a decision collectively, council administration, but the policies and procedures will be in place regardless, obviously, new hires, current trainings, and then as we, people are offboarded. So.
Yeah, my comment was more on the City Hall, long-term thing versus the ADA thing, but nonetheless, both are good to hear of where we're at with both of those. So thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mr. Girardi tonight? Hearing none.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Girardi.
very much.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move to page 9. And this is our turf. We're going to go over the city council budget. Personnel services, salaries, $21,750. FICA, $1,700. Life insurance, $1,200. Pensions, $35,400. Health insurance, $136,000 for a subtotal of $196,050. Office rental, nothing. General office supplies, $250. Equipment, $2,500. Subtotal for supplies and materials, $2,750. Other expenditures, $17,500. Contract services, nothing. Training, $150. Legislative contingency, $123,700 for a subtotal of other expenditures, $141,350, and a total department expense of $340,150. Any comments from council members tonight? Mrs. Katz.
Joe, why aren't we charged rent? We do use this.
Well, this is intergovernmental, so you don't have to charge government agencies for this space right here.
There's no rent
No.
for any of this.
So as far as Adam, I believe that's correct, right? As long as it's intergovernmental. Right. Yeah, there's no charge for that. So as long as it's intergovernmental and it's a meeting, right, there's no charge for that, to utilize this space for,
So even if we go back to having our committee meetings live,
right. There's no
there'd be
charge
no
for that.
charge at all.
The Water Authority uses it for their meetings.
They don't
so,
get charged
yeah,
either.
There's no charge for intergovernmental meetings. So that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check. Then
Pardon me.
are,
Would that be if we, when we sign a lease for this, will it stay that?
Oh, yeah, as far as I know.
Okay.
As long as it's intergovernmental, from what I've been told, we can double check with the solicitors. But yeah, as far as I know, even before we came here, the Water Authority had used this location and we don't charge them. So as long as it's intergovernmental meetings, there's no charge for that. And that's eligible.
okay. My other question is, our legislative contingency, $123,000.
Mr. Pavlak will speak to that.
There are some undetermined costs, I think, that are going to go through in the next couple of meetings that may move that back down to the $75,000 range that we're expected to be at. I can get more information after tomorrow night's meeting
Right.
related to that.
Okay, because we are not aware of this. Okay.
No.
Okay.
It's something that will potentially shift down to other lines within the budget, depending on the outcome of some of the items on
Mhm.
tomorrow's agenda. So
Okay.
we can discuss it at that point.
Okay, and then I'd like to ask 17,500 is
It's-
other
it's-
expenditures?
It's the price of, having all of our meetings captioned, various things that we're, required to do at this point, along with the Zoom meetings and everything else that we've encountered, during these crazy times.
So that's, okay, that's those expenses. Equipment, 2,500. That's, what is that for? It
which-
says under supplies and materials, equipment, 2,500. I'm sorry, Joe, but since this is our department,
No
I want
worries.
to clarify some of this.
I think that that's the intent, potentially to do some computer equipment for making digital information available to city council members.
Mhm.
For instance, iPads, laptops, something of that nature. It's not the amount that will cover everyone, but phasing it in.
Okay. And the other thing is health insurance. That really jumped. Why did that jump?
It's jumped across the board.
It jumped
Remember, we
across
had-
that high?
Yeah, it's jumping in all the departments with the exception of police and fire. If you'll see that theirs are pretty flat, if not up or down, just a hair. So it's just the way that we are breaking them out with the new blended cost by moving the post-65 retirees and police and fire to another plan.
I think it's time that we start looking.
I think I don't necessarily agree with that thought. I think you have to look at the total cost. And I think in total, our costs are a lot closer under that 10% mark, which is typically where we're at. So I don't disagree with looking. I'm just saying, I don't think that number right there is a factor.
Well, sometimes we get into a comfort zone with something and as we found out with other insurances that we saved costs after a while. And I think it would behoove us to really look into and see if there are other avenues to.
And I'm not
to explore.
disagreeing that we shouldn't look. I'm just saying
just
that
look.
on the surface here, you may not be seeing all the details.
Right.
From a
Oh,
cost
I can
perspective.
understand that. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Just to be clear, Joe, the money that we saved on the retiree health benefits would show up in the OPEBs that we don't deal with?
It would show we pay on a pay-as-you-go basis. So we pay year to year.
Got it.
So we're budgeting in 2022, pretty
For
much the
what we
same
would pay.
cost.
Got it.
But because we're doing that and they're the only two departments that are affected by those plans,
Mhm.
everyone else is seeing a higher increase because the blended cost of removing those post-65 groups that would, I think the easier way for me is to find a way to put it in a memo, rather than trying to go through here and explain it. I think that I can.
Did you see my eyes start to cross?
I know that I'm not going to say
No,
it
that's
exactly
fine.
the best way.
I
So
don't need to understand it now. I'm just a little confused at the concept that we are only seeing an increase of 7 to 10%, even though I'm seeing an increase on every health insurance line of 30%. So, and that's, and it's fine. And I believe you. I'm not saying, I
No.
would just like to understand it better.
I think I can illustrate it better on paper.
Okay.
So if you can give me
All
a
right.
chance to put something together for tomorrow night,
Sure.
I'll have some
It doesn't need
information.
to be tomorrow night.
Yeah, it'd be great.
It's just a long-term curiosity. Thanks,
Thank
Joe. I'm sure the numbers are right.
Yeah. Oh, Joe's always got them right. To be clear on that legislative contingency, it's been typical different years that we've parked money there that we know is going to be distributed to other parts of the budget, but it takes,
It's for those unknowns.
Yeah.
And, there are some times that we have different things going on. We typically try to set aside an amount, $175,000. But there are some ongoing issues that, we'll try to set some money aside in case
right.
we need to use it. If not, I feel, that if the issues get resolved tomorrow night, then we can, redistribute or eliminate that.
And $150 training that nobody asked about, I believe that's for a notary, right?
No, that
Jeez.
would be in the next budget. This
Okay.
one was, I believe in the ordinances, there's an amount set aside for training where
Oh,
if
that's
any
true.
member of
Yeah.
council wants to go to a training, I think it has to be approved by the president or vice president for those two.
That used to be a bigger number, but we.
Yeah, and I think that was put in 2 years ago when we had some new council, a group of new council members coming in. There was a Pennsylvania Municipal League new elected official training type class. And, perhaps if Councilman-elect Biter wants to, take advantage of that, if council
Right.
would permit them, that, the money would be there for that.
Yeah. It's there. Are we good on that budget for now? Okay, let's go to page 10. Personnel services, salaries, 38,000. This is city clerk. Personnel services salaries, $38,507. FICA, $3,000. Life insurance, $275. Workers' comp, $70. Pensions, $21,551. Health insurance, $11,000. Auto allowance, $700. For a subtotal of $75,103. Purchase of services, other service and document image, $2,500. Advertising, $8,000. Codification of ordinances, $3,500. Office rental, $0. Training, $500. For a subtotal purchase services, $14,500. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $800. Equipment, $0. Subtotal of supplies and materials, $800, for a total department expense of $90,403. Questions from council members? Anything? Mrs. Katz?
I'm going to address the salary. Our city clerk has not received a raise in, I think, 3 years. And not only does she do the work for us and she's our employee, but she also does a lot of work for the rest of the city. She's also the notary for the city. And I think I don't think it's right that she doesn't get a raise with all that she does. That's one of the items I want to address. The other one is there's also no rent on here, Joe.
Again,
We're not charging rent for the hallway.
I don't know how hallways fit into the overall scheme of things. I can, discuss with Mr. Winder and see whether that needs to be reevaluated.
Okay. I know the square foot of the desk.
I think we're just calling that the waiting room, so, yeah. Yes, I agree with your first point. I think we all do. Oh, Mr. Yoder.
Yeah, and this might be more of a question for the mayor. Because I noticed throughout the budget, there are particular people that do get salary increases and others that don't. What was the strategy with picking who got salary increases and who didn't?
Sure. The only two at-wills that did would have been Molly and Scott, and that was just contractual when they were hired on. The other at-wills did not. So we did not do anything else with any of the other at-wills.
What contract do we have with Molly? Because I don't recall having a contract
The
that we
6-month,
approved
yeah,
in the resolution appointing her.
I think it was to 65, I believe.
The resolution stated what was budgeted.
And I think we said after that 6 months, it would go to 65, if I remember correctly.
I'd have to go back and look at my notes.
So it was just
but-
her and Scott. Other at-wills, we didn't do anything else with them. So they stayed frozen. So, but I'm happy to have the conversation. You know, if we want to, you know, I think personally, if we give Janice, Frank, I think we should probably do, if it's 2% or whatever the case might be, it should be the other. I think it's really, how much did it come out to, Joe? Like $9,000, I think, total across the board. If we did that, was it 2.5? Yeah, if we did a 3%, it's in the $9,000 to $12,000 range. I do agree. I think at-wills have been frozen now for 2 or 3 years. So I don't disagree with that, but I wanted to have the conversation first before just doing that. So we did keep those the same for the moment. But if, you know, if council's in agreement, I'd be happy to do 2 or 3% for at-wills. I do agree. I think they deserve it. So.
Bonnie might.
The city clerk does not only do work for us, but she does work for a lot of the city, including your office and other offices that come to her for so many different things. And so it's just not her. So, you know, to me, and plus the other thing that's happening in her office is a lot of right to knows. And you're aware of this also because you are inundated with, she comes to you for the information.
Right.
That's a lot of extra work put on her plate that was never done before. So I think, you know, looking at not her salary being justified with this, I just don't find this right. I really don't.
Well, and again, I think we can make that case for all that, well, Janice included. I think we can make that case for the other, what is it, Joe, 9 or so at-wills that we have. You know, I think they all do a great job and they all do a lot of work. So, you know, again, I would be in favor of,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not disagreeing with the increase. You know, I think it would be justified across the board, to be honest, with our at-wills. They all do a lot of work and they work hard. You know, it's
Yeah.
not, you know, I'm not saying the others do less work or, you know, I think they all work hard.
Yeah, certainly. No, we should really look at that. I don't, we're given, or the proposal includes John Sander also, who's also at will, I believe. Nonetheless, we really need to be cognizant of the optics that presents. And really need to be cognizant of employee retention and morale. We have a lot of tenured employees that even if we're going to discuss what raises in the city look like, the optics of proposing for some and not everybody has that potential to hurt morale. So we really need to be cognizant of that in the future. And I don't recall any contracts specifically with any of the at-will employees between Mr. Sander. Well, we didn't approve Mr. Sander. He's that's your
Right.
realm specifically, but Mr. Livermore and Ms. Shrimp. So I have to go back and look at my records and my notes.
I thought we talked about it.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah.
The other thing related to the office rental, we really need to find somewhere else for our city clerk. Right out here in the hall really is not safe. It's not secure. And I think with her tenure, you know, I think we can find her somewhere better out of City Hall that is more accommodating for her. So I hope that we can find somewhere sooner than later. Maybe Mr. Winder can aid in those efforts, but just a general comment.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Not only is it not safe and secure for the city clerk, it's also there's sensitive information that she has with her office, but it's really on her desk, open, and that's just not a long-term. I think it's been a little bit too long, so I think we're agreed on that. Okay, any other questions or comments from council? All right, we'll move to page 11, Bureau of Law.
I'll take it.
Okay.
On page 11, under Bureau of Law, contract services for legal services, 125,000, training, 1,200, lien filing, 1,300 for a subtotal of $127,500. Under supplies and materials, general office supplies, $2,000 for total department cost of $129,500.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlik. Questions?
Thank you. Joe, did we receive invoices from all the solicitors?
I just believe in the last week I've been, I've received through the third quarter for all of our solicitors, or well, at least for McCormick and for Casale and Bonner. So I'm working on in between this, getting that report updated for those.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think I was more or less making your point, Bonnie. But I guess the further question I had is, Joe, I can't remember, and I didn't want to bother Randy for a page out of his budget book. What did we budget in 2020 for legal services? To what extent is that? I know that I believe that we budgeted higher in 2021 in anticipation of RFPing, of our legal costs going up, but I don't remember. It was 67, 70,000, something like that.
I want to say that that's correct. I guess everyone can pull that number.
Okay.
For
Everybody who brought
tomorrow.
their budget book.
The 2022 proposed is based upon the not to exceeds that
Right.
we've set with the current, and then a small amount for conflict
Margin.
resolution.
Yeah. But I guess more to the point, we think that we will fall within that 130-ish number we this year.
I guess when I look at the bills that I just received tomorrow, then I'll be able to give you a better idea.
If you
tomorrow
don't
night.
mind, like shoot us a text or something. I'm just kind of curious. I know that we were exceptionally nervous when we put out those RFPs last year, and it would be nice to know that at least we budgeted a little bit more than it cost us. If that in fact is what comes to pass. 77. Okay. All right.
But we
Excellent.
haven't overused it.
Right. Yeah, we haven't. Yeah, exactly. We haven't abused it yet. So that's good. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. That's everything.
Actually, in total, I'm sorry, Bonnie, for 2020, because we split out the services provided by McCormick, the total was around $97,000.
That's true. Yeah, we had the 20,000 in.
That's the one that I'm looking at has that in there for 2020.
Yeah. So it's up, but it's not perhaps grotesquely up, which would be great. Thanks, Joe. That's all.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to Controller's Office, page 36. Welcome, Mrs. Woodring.
Thank you. Good evening, President Ellison and members of council and Mayor Slaughter. The 2022 controller's budget is as follows. Personnel services for salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, and health insurance. The subtotal is $121,004. For purchase of services, we have the auditing service, office rental and training, subtotal purchase of services, $64,592. For supplies and materials, we have general office supplies, general office equipment. The subtotal for that is $1,200. The total department expense is $186,796.
Questions, anyone? Mr. Yoder?
Good evening, Peg. How are you?
Good evening. Fine, thank you.
My only question is, just wanted to verify that our 2022 proposed auditing service is going to be adequate for 2022. I know we went over this year, and I know we're catching up on the past couple of years, but I just wanted to see if we were in an okay position there. And it looks like the mayor might be able to help you out with that one too.
Yes, thank you.
I've been working with them and actually it's coming to council next week.
Okay.
So ZNA will be here to discuss that, the change in scope. And so
Okay.
can't answer that question right now, but
Gotcha.
after the conversation with them at council next Thursday, or probably Tuesday at finance, and then Thursday, that probably would shed more light on that.
Okay.
So
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Peg.
Okay,
Anything else?
I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Mrs. Woodring.
Okay, thank you.
Move to tax collection treasurer's office, page 37. Welcome, Mr. Grimes.
Thank you. Good evening, council. For the 2022 treasurer and tax collector budget for personnel services, which includes salaries, part-time, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, and health insurance, total personnel services of $217,575. For purchase of services, we have automation services for $27,500. We have subscriptions and dues for $200, travel and training, $2,100, office rental, $9,911, contract services, $20,000, for total purchase of services of $59,711. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $2,500, equipment, $30,000, for total supplies and materials of $32,500, and a total department expenditure of $309,786.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Questions from council members tonight? Ms. Mealy?
Thanks, Randy. I think I'm just forgetting, Nick, but what's the contract services?
So we moved that out of legal services into contract services because it really includes legal services and auditing services. The legal services are for a variety of things, whether it's, certain updates that need to happen to rules, regulations, ordinances, which is a smaller piece now. More likely if we need to file something with the magistrate, if somebody's is not paying, or right now we have active litigation against somebody who's not paying taxes. That's proving to be a little costly. So we don't really have an idea where that's going to be in a year. That's why we had to transfer some in this year, because we have a larger tax balance that we assessed somebody that they said they didn't owe, that they challenged. Other years we might have nothing for legal services.
Got it. Understood. And then just tell me a little bit about the business privilege mercantile tax since it's come in-house. It seems you generally feel that's been a totally beneficial thing. To what extent do you think, and I know we've realized increased collections, are we also saving ourselves money on the back end on the collections perspective?
I think we are. I think that right now it's cheaper than what we were paying Berkheimer to collect it. I think it's a win all around because I think the customer service is much better. The processing is much faster. It's simpler, more understandable for the taxpayers, which is all the reasons that equate to more collections. And we've seen an increase in collections. I think that there's some steps that we can take. I did send a memo to President Allison and the mayor. It was closer to when this budget was released, so it was pretty late, but on some steps we could take to spend a little more money to gain more revenue. And that's really to look at, now that we've had the collections in-house for almost 2 full years, to start to take a more serious look at delinquent collections. And I say serious, I don't want to say aggressive, because it's not, we're not going to go out there and be unfair to taxpayers. But in the same token, if we say, if you don't pay your real estate taxes, we're going to take your house. If you don't pay your business privilege taxes, we're going to send you a bunch of letters. That's unfair to the taxpayers who are compliant. but that costs some money to set that up for some training, for some additional part-time hours, not a new staff, but some additional pay there, which also helps with discovery services to find more businesses who may not even be on our tax rolls.
Excellent. Well, that's clearly a discussion that we should have then here moving forward. I mean, the Treasurer's Department obviously is the one department of the city that is pretty much always to the positive. Yeah. But it's exciting the extent to which your department has managed to really realize additional revenue. When I think sometimes we kind of look at the revenue side of the city and think that it's somewhat static, and unless we can begin to look at, real economic development or something like that. But the truth of the matter is that even in the absence of pursuing aggressive economic development, there are additional revenue options that can bring in funds. And Nick, you've really done a good job of spearheading those efforts in the city. We appreciate it.
Other comments? Thank you, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you.
Excuse me. We'll move to next item. The next section is Human Resources, HR, page 26, and welcome, Ms. Shrimp Steele.
Thank
How
you
are
very
tonight?
much. Good evening, council. For the Human Resources Department, we have personnel services, which encompasses salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, and health insurance for a suggested total of $107,000 and $576. Under purchase of services, we would have office supplies at 500, communications at 750. Advertising is nothing for this year. Medical exams at 900, office rental at 2,717, training at 850. And the subtotal for purchase of services would be $5,717 for a total projected department expense of $113,293.
Thank you. Are there questions from council members tonight? Okay,
That was easy.
can't
Thank
get
you.
easier than that. Thank you very much. We'll move to Finance and Administration, Information Technology, page 27. Good evening, Mr. Black.
Good evening. How's everybody doing?
We're good, I
Good.
think.
This is my first budget pitch in probably 23, 24 years. So I'm a little rusty at this. Under personal services, you will see there's nothing listed there as far as expenditures to the county this year. Under materials and supplies and materials, you have supplies at $5,000, communications at 0 for a total of $5,000 in that category. Under equipment, the equipment expense alone this year is going to be 0. Under software, we have $4,625 for a subtotal in that category of $4,625. Under contracted services, it's $146,437. Web hosting and maintenance is $25. For a subtotal of purchases of services, $146,462, and total department expense of $156,087.
Thank you. Questions from council? Mr. Yoder.
How are you, Chris? You may or may not be able to answer this question. The contract services, explain that to me, please.
That is where we moved the salary down there for now until we had a conversation with council. If we want to hire a person on the city side of things fully, that's where that salary benefits and everything is right in there in addition to the other. Or if we want to, I know last year, obviously with IT, we had discussed outsourcing maybe even a portion of it that could go to contract services. So that's kind of where we're housing everything right now, pending further conversation with the administration and council, how we want to see that move forward. So That's just kind of there. We could slide it back up. Obviously, if we need to, we could keep it there. But we had I think a decent conversation last year about IT specifically, what we want to see moving forward, how we want that to work. I know I've spoken to a few people offline about that moving forward. Obviously, Chris is doing a fantastic job. We're using that right now to reimburse time that he spends on the city side, particularly mainly it was during the move. Not so much, too much anymore. We're getting PD set up, but beyond that, not a whole lot. So that's kind of where that's housed right now for the moment.
Is there any, over the past year, investigatory work that has been done by the administration, whether it's talking to potential providers, maybe even putting an RFP together to see what that might look like? Where does that effort
Yes, so I
stand?
did. Yes. So I've met with one, kind of look at to see what they could provide potentially. There's still a cost to it.
Yeah, certainly.
Anytime you outsource, I have mixed feelings about it. I kind of like it in-house where we control it and we know what they're doing on day to day. You outsource, they may be able to get here, they may not, they still have to turn a profit and all of that. So, it's there, they can provide a service. And I do think, it's extremely difficult with one or two people for, a city our size to have, that small of an IT department. If you increase the department, obviously that's cost goes up. So maybe we want to outsource a portion of it and keep, a portion of it in-house, but that's conversations we could have. I'm, at the moment, I'm kind of split on it, to be honest. I think it is beneficial to have one or two here in-house and maybe outsource a portion of it. Chris and I talked a little bit about that, but I'm not fully sold on, outsourcing a large part of our IT services. I just don't, I'm not sure we'll get the best bang for our buck. Maybe, a small portion of it, but not full. So but I have met with folks and
If I can add to that. Outsourcing is good for like a mom and pop shop or something like that, where you don't need a full-time IT person. This place needs, I could use a full-time tech just for public safety to do nothing but help with the police department, the fire department, and codes, whomever. I could have a person handle that full-time alone. There is a lot of other work that also needs to be done. There's a lot of infrastructure work that needs corrected drastically. And if I had that particular person on board or had those resources available to me, I could concentrate on getting that and getting a lot of those holes filled and corrected.
Yeah, I don't doubt any of that. I would just simply encourage you and the administration to work through that and do it sooner than later. I believe you're an RVT employee currently.
Correct.
You providing service to the general fund kind of goes against the strategy that we've tried to implement over the past couple of years of creating a barrier between RVT and the city. And it goes against, I keep referencing this performance report. I mean, there's a clear recommendation that RVT needs to stop doing that. We really don't really have a choice right now. I understand that, but we need to figure that out sooner than later. So I think the sooner we finalize that work and can get that brought forward to us, I think the better position we would be in for compliance sake, as well as just to actually get some of the infrastructure you're talking about taken care of and moving forward.
Yeah. I have to admit, this is probably one of the most unique situations that I've ever been employed in. Kind of separate, but not.
I think we all kind of feel
Yeah, I think
like
you're
that,
preaching to
right?
the choir there. I think you're preaching to the choir there. So, and don't get me wrong. I think you're doing a very satisfactory job. I mean, don't take that the wrong way. We need to make sure that we're making progress in all of these areas and cleaning up those gray areas. Gray in this case is not good. We need to figure it out. That's all.
I work with tech. You
Yep,
guys work
understood.
with money.
Yep, understood.
I'll spend your money for you, but
Absolutely. Thank you.
sure.
Mrs. Katz?
I do have to agree with the mayor. I do know when we did have an IT person in-house, a large percentage of his time was spent with the police department. And you're also speaking of getting more software, and you take up a majority of an IT person's time. And at times, some of us say selfishly, because a lot of us don't get the help we need because you need it so desperately. So one person taking care of IT for the city was not working. I'm going to tell you truthfully, it wasn't, because there were so many other departments that needed the help. And, you know, I fire, you probably were neglected. And I know other departments were neglected. So I think maybe outsourcing and maybe having in-house, I think maybe a combination is going to have to come to fruition, because it just didn't work in the past. You know, and so we are going to have to come up with something. The world is going in this direction. Everything is digital. We need to work on this. It's vitally important in so many different areas. So, you know, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and just I think I know where Councilman Banks is going, and I'll certainly let him go there. I'm glad to see that he is. I mean, just some of the ties back to some of the discussion we were having earlier with the police and fire. I mean, as it sits with a bare bones budget, we're really looking at a $1.8 million deficit, you know, and what you do is extremely critical for everything day to day for the city. What that looks like is going to have a financial impact. We need to figure it out. We need to figure it out very much. So.
And with that predictable. Yeah, I agree with the mayor that we should have an in-house person. I mean, there may be some services we can contract out, like a help desk type of thing. But what we've got from the last Chris and from you, Mr. Black, was a person who can actually set up the hardware side of things. You know, someone who's on hand for technical expertise, and some of these things just can't wait. You know, so
Yeah,
so
a
I'm
lot of the times I've seen where people try to use MSPs is when it's the lag between the need and then the fulfillment of that need. Depending on what it is, it could be days, you know, and how backed up they are on things, and where we fall in that pecking order.
Right.
And as we move to, you know, a more digital environment, I know in my job, you know, I'm doing drafting all the time, and if my computer goes down, I'm not working. You know, it just doesn't happen. So we have more and more of that going on within the city. So we need to have someone on hand who's responsive for that. So, and I only have so many public meetings left to, you know, speak publicly. So, you know, you just gotta get my 2 cents, but I'm glad that Adam knew where I was going with that.
Chris, you mentioned the infrastructure and those kinds of things. Were there problems? I don't want to put more on your plate, but could you give us, not right this minute, but like a narrative, a brief synopsis? I'm not tech savvy, so you
Of what we got and what we need.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, what we're actually looking at, so we have some kind of idea, the areas. Now, for instance, public safety software is probably vastly
The
different.
GIS software. Yes.
Yeah, so that would be a specialty area for somebody.
That is something that we've been working with Chelsea Blair and I have been in discussions with. And depending on how she gets her funding for it, that's something we could do very easily.
Okay, great. I think we'd be all interested in getting a better grasp of, we realize there's a big problem there, but if we could see it broken down, it'd be nice. Mr. Younger.
To piggyback off of you, Randy, and I knew where you were going. I was hoping you were gonna bring this up also, to kind of reinforce, I think, what Randy's talking about. I think citywide, we really need a cohesive strategy of digitization, what have you. And I'll commend Councilman Banks last year, was hoping started that process of, you know, legislating that we get there. we haven't, and you're probably not aware of that. We were, I think, making some progress, at least from council's perspective, before your predecessor.
I've been here 9 weeks.
I know. I think at least from council's perspective, we were making some progress in that regard before your predecessor left. But aside from that, I think the only department that is actually compliant with that resolution is the treasurer's office. So, frankly, we're we're violating our own policy. We really need that. We really need to understand what that strategy looks like. So the sooner that we figure out what that looks like, the better.
Sure.
Other comments or questions tonight? Okay, that's
All right.
very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You as well. And we'll finish tonight with finance, pages 23 through 25. And welcome again, Mr. Pavlik.
Okay, on page 23 for personnel services, salaries and related benefits, subtotal of $129,025. Under purchase of services, contracted services, $10,000, subscriptions and dues, $150, training, $1,000, planning expense, $168,000, and office rental of $7,854 for a subtotal of $187,004, and total department expense of $316,029.
Thank you. Questions from council? Okay, seeing none, page 24 then.
For finance and purchasing, under personnel services, again, salaries and related benefits, a subtotal of $84,692. For purchase of services, our commercial insurance policies, $482,000, subscription and dues, $10,500, and municipal tax office expense, $87,000, for a subtotal of $579,500. For supplies and materials, general office supplies, $5,800, and printing supplies, $1,500, for a subtotal of $77,300. Under equipment repairs, office equipment, nothing, service contracts and rentals, $5,000, and contracted services, again, nothing, for a subtotal of $5,000. And then on the next page, for short-term interest, proposed for 2022 is $15,000, bringing the total department expense to $691,492.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlik. Question on any of that from council? Mr. Banks.
Joe, I'm just looking at the insurance commercial policies jump.
Right now, we're still waiting to get proposals in, I believe. I think the mayor is working on that with Ms. Nagy and our insurance broker. But one of the things that I've been hearing and wanted to incorporate in here in case we did see them are increased deductibles for any claims that we do have, just based on the number that we've been seeing. That's one of the first things that the carriers are looking at to try to keep our policy cost somewhat in line.
Anybody? Ms. Mealy.
And Joe, if I can jump back to the salaries, or never mind, I guess, jump to the salary element. We've been talking about putting somebody else in your department forever, correct? Or not forever, but
There was someone there pre-pandemic, during the pandemic kicked in. They were a contracted employee or through a staffing agency. So we stopped that relationship and it hasn't been brought back to this point.
So pardon me, I wasn't aware of that actually. So we've been talking about putting someone else in your department even when there was a contracted employee pre-pandemic.
No, I think
Correct?
that employee was the person. So there was
Okay.
I can't recall how long that individual was there, but there was a year or so that we did have more
Somebody,
than two
okay.
individuals in the department.
Have the needs of your department been reduced since the pandemic?
I don't think anyone's needs have been reduced.
Well, my needs haven't been reduced, but I made the mistake of having 2 more kids. So anyway, no, that was not a mistake in the slightest, but Lord knows things only seem to have gotten busier with the pandemic, I think, in everybody's lives for a wide variety of reasons, and in everybody's work lives as well. Just wanted to make the point that, especially if we had that position staffed until the pandemic, it seems like we might be making a mistake to be not staffing that position in a city government where we have placed really an increasing burden on the finance department. So I think that's something that we should all be bearing in mind as we contemplate the budget tomorrow and next Thursday. Thanks, guys.
Mr. Banks?
To that effect, Joe, could you find out what we were paying for that contracted service? Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Pavlik. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just, I
Thank you.
don't know what you're jumping into. We still have capital budget or the capital projects budget, which we deferred from last week.
Oh, that's right.
So I don't, we can go with Bonnie's.
I just have a question. We have nothing in the budget for Office of Planning and Economic Development. Is there a
Planning was-
reason for that?
Planning was something that was proposed. Right now, our only planning costs are up in my department. The cost for our consultants of Keller and Partners and Delta Development. There was some discussion through this budget process of potentially moving some money in for some salaries and benefits that the Community Development Department to allow some of their time to be put into planning efforts, but that didn't make it to the final cut.
Should that have not been done? This is budget time and we should know
It was
this.
requested and at this point, we weren't able to, keep that request within the budget.
So what you're
proposal.
talking about is the department did not hand in a budget then?
No, the department made a request through the review and getting the budget to be delivered. It was pulled out at one point.
Okay.
Okay, page 38, I believe.
On page 38, that's another miscellaneous budget for capital projects. Under the projected revenues, there's a transfer from debt service of $675,000. Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, $145,000. First Community Foundation of Pennsylvania, $150,000. Lycoming County, $20,000. And the Commonwealth Financing Authority multimodal funding of $100,000 for total projected revenue of $1,090,000. Under the proposed expenditures, there's City Hall and Fire Headquarters improvements, $175,000. Los Park improvements for $145,000. Brandon Park Band Shell for $170,000. Levy improvements, future match, $500,000. And then the Williamsport Safety Improvement Project, which is the 4th Street and Campbell Street project, $100,000 for total expenditures of $1,090,000.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlik. Questions? Mr. Banks.
We'll make this public, my sidebar conversation with Liz. Joe, three budgets in 2 years on council isn't really a long historic perspective on this. So does the revenue for capital projects fluctuate this much from year to year? Is that
It just depends on what projects, what grants we have. Right now, these are what we're aware of. Some of the projects that aren't showing funding on the expenditure side, there's Willow Street, there's West Fourth Street. You'll see a lot of those projects in design in 2022, along with the Williamsport Safety Improvement Project, which is what the $100,000 is set aside for the design. But then as you go on, you're going to look in the future year to see a lot of the grant funding coming into play for the actual construction work to occur. So it just depends from year to year where the projects that grants have been awarded for are sitting in their timeline.
Thanks, Joe.
Ms. Mueller.
But to the point, at least in terms of the capital projects budget, and it might be fair to ask, how are we handling the American Rescue Plan funds, Joe, in terms of the capital projects budget?
My feeling was to keep them excluded from this budget,
Okay.
set them off on their own. So, early in the year when we start to develop and actually finally formalize the plan to adopt a budget at that point with modifications to be made throughout the year as more things are added or things are transferred, through different projects.
Got it. Do you see it as featuring in our primary budget or as kind of being a separate
It's going to be a
accounting thing?
multi-year budget. I've set the funds up as a separate fund.
Got it.
For instance, the capital projects is a separate fund, separate from the general fund.
So in 2022, when we look at the 2023 budget, more than likely there will be
And it's something that I would like to start in 2022 to give something to add to the packet you have now,
Okay.
and then revise that, as years goes on
Great.
For that year.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to understand, because I mean, I think in this year's capital project budget, we're really not contemplating doing all that much. But of course, we are contemplating doing a fair amount with that funding. So, and clearly, of course, it should be tracked just as closely because we owe that to our citizens here in the city as well as to the American taxpayers. As we track any other expenditures. So thanks, Joe, for looking forward to that already.
Any other questions on this particular budget? I just have one, the Brandon Park band shell expenditure. Will that complete that project?
There's 170 here, but remember, there's also money sitting in CDBG. I don't know the exact total there, but I believe that John Sander is working on getting, didn't we just get a design for that, or did you not bring that yet? Sorry, I thought. Yeah.
Question in regards to the band shell, what was it again? Sorry.
I'm just wondering, the $170,000 tied into whatever else we have, will that complete the band shell?
Conclude or include, you said?
Complete it.
Yes. Yes. We have funds, that are city, CDBG, and county. Give me a second, I'll tell you. Yeah. You know that better than I do. Give me 1 sec. Yes, as far as funding for the band shell, we have 150 from the FCFP Foundation, 110 from the city, and 20,000 from the county. Sure, it should be. Yeah. As of now, the design is still ongoing. They've expended about $6,000 of the $30,000 we just hired them for a few months ago. So as of now, yes, it is good.
Okay. Great. It's been an ongoing
we're looking to have a construction set developed next fall and ready for 2023 construction.
Oh,
Man show.
okay. Well, at least we have a timeline. Yeah. Great. Are there any other questions on capital budget? Thank you, Mr. Sander. Okay, if you're none, I think, and talking about ARPA, we definitely need to, in January, tie that down. I'm just going to float an idea out here that we possibly consider adding a consultant who's a specialist in ARPA spending to, guide us through those questions that we have periodically, and we get answers, but sometimes not as clear as we prefer.
If I can piggyback off of that, I think that's extremely critical when we talk compliance and reporting of this. Councilwoman Mealy, you brought up about Joe's department. I mean, he's literally an office of one. And I mean, I'm going to guess he probably works, 60-ish hours a week right now. That's without ARPA money. And frankly, with the rules changing so much and some of the intricacies of how this money can be spent, that might be a just really good practice for that specifically. I think we've seen other cities do that and in different ways, but that's something we should definitely look at and consider, and pretty quickly.
Yeah.
To reinforce your point.
Okay. Mr. Banks. Oh, just waving. Hi. Hi, Dave. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our work session, second work session. We do have a regular council meeting tomorrow night with a regular agenda, as well as anything budget related that council members might bring to the table. Upcoming meetings, Tuesday, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, 11:30 a.m. Public Safety, 1 p.m. Finance Committee, 2:30 p.m. Public Works. Wednesday, December 8th, 11:30 a.m. Redevelopment Authority, 3:30 p.m. Officers and Employees Pension Board meeting. And I don't anticipate Friday the 10th there being an ERC meeting. So that brings